Welcome to Conversations with CSG, the global talent podcast from CSG Talent. We interview influential figures across a wide range of innovative and impactful industry sectors worldwide, discussing career journeys, overcoming challenge, achieving success, diversity, and much more. I'm sure you'll see value in a lot of the topics we cover. So here it is. Hope you enjoy.
Well, today I'd like to welcome to Conversations with CSG, Scott Carlin. Scott, thank you very much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, Scott, we've invited you here today because we wanted to get a perspective from an industry leader who truly understands the full end-to-end life cycle within the materials handling industry. And who better to talk to than someone with a career trajectory that really is a blueprint for leadership in the industry. I mean, you began with the rigorous technical and cultural foundations of Raymond and Toyota, particularly on the manufacturing and operations side, utilizing TPS's production systems, learning about the warranty departments, and then moving towards the front end and the customer-facing elements of the role, whereby you were in national account sales, product design development, product support, and then you moved even further and closer to the customer, working with some of the leading dealerships in the US market, serving as a vice president of sales at Shoppers, where you led the charging, storage and automation and warehouse design with application training. So really bringing the new products and new skill sets through into the industry. And now you sit in the C-suite for one of the leading North American fleet management companies. So we wanted to tap into the unique vision and specifically how you've synthesized decades of Toyota grade discipline with wider leadership strategy. So, Scott, it's a pleasure to have your perspective today on the podcast and on the state of the industry.
Thank you. Exciting to be here.
Wonderful. So you've worked in the material handling sector for over 3 decades now. You've got a wealth of experience, knowledge, and had many successes. Please, could you talk us through your white paper on the Deliberate COO, a 32-year blueprint on material handling leadership and the key takeaways?
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a bit of a labor of love, if you will, kind of a strategic self-reflection, if you will. Really talking about the impact of the mentors who really shaped my career and the trajectory of my career. The blueprint concept, it originated from a VP that I reported to many years ago, and I just deeply respected him. He was kind of a no-nonsense guy. Really, the blueprint itself, it serves as a competency roadmap. It really is to validate where I am versus where I want to be as a leader. Is that without a vision, without a target, it's really just a dream. So growing up in the Toyota world, I applied what's called Toyota Kata. I felt deeply about that on how I wanted to apply that to my own professional development. So really just baseline where I am, setting a goal, then working towards that goal with purpose. You run experiments and you try different things to try to make corrective actions and see those mistakes that you're making, and it's okay to make those mistakes. But how are you going to learn from them and try to get to that next level in order to get towards your target? In this case, who do I want to be? What do I want to be as a leader? And so sitting with this VP, he mapped out 6 critical pillars of business knowledge. And again, being a no-nonsense person, he really laid it out with, let's talk about your skills and let's talk about what you need. So he said, what do you want to be? And I'm like, I want to be a COO. I want to be a major leader in this industry. He said, let's write that down. So we whiteboarded. He said, operations, procurement, sales, engineering, aftermarket, P&L management, just listed out these pillars and said, okay, let's talk about skill gap. So as we went through that, I turned my career into a series of those strategic experiments. This disciplined approach, and I'll talk more about really my foundation of servant leadership. That remains my compass. But I believe the organizational pyramid, it has to be inverted, where the executive doesn't sit on top of the apex, but your function is to serve as the foundation, removing roadblocks, building skills, for your associates, and then empowering the team to really reach those goals. Bob Briggs with PeopleWorks International helped me to kind of see who I wanted to be as a leader. Wonderful teacher and mentor, and introduced me to the servant leader by John Stahl and Ken Jennings. It really helped define what compass I needed and what I wanted it to be. And then I have an interesting mix of people I throw in there, because people like Jocko Willink, Tony Robbins, Bob Chapman, the COO of Barry Wehmiller, 3 totally different people, but each have inspired me. And really, in my notebooks, I think I've mentioned, I try to, every time I start a new notebook, and I make sure that in the beginning of this notebook, I start off with writing down who I want to be. What are my core principles? It starts off with honesty, teamwork, work ethic, unwavering, never forgiving, 3 majors, never walk away from that. Honesty, teamwork, work ethic. The second one is self-reflection. If on a daily basis, you're not looking at what you could have done better and then try to do better today, I don't know what your intent is, right? So the third one is setting targets and relentless effort. And that goes to that Jocko Willink's aspect, extreme ownership. And then the fourth one, associate empowerment, engagement. As a leader, be engaged, empower your associates. The fifth, support and develop. We have to support our associates, develop them. And with that, again, at the beginning of every one of my notebooks, it's a reminder every day, do better. So that's really what I want to be as a leader. And it's really the power of caring for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for, sharing such a deep insight into how it is you want to lead organizations. And I think one thing that you mentioned there that I've never heard framed in the way you framed it is flipping the pyramid within an organization so that you're the foundation as opposed to the apex. Can you delve a little further into that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's literally one of my favorite books, and I don't even know how many times I've actually read it. Another thing, one of the tricks I like to do is I rewrite the book in the sense of I make notes and I delve into each of the drawings in this book, which is you take that triangle where the leader's on top and all your associates in alignment of title fall down. And the serving leader really talks about flipping that completely upside down. The leadership is at the bottom. And that's because it's up to the executive team to support the business. So if you flip that triangle upside down, our job then becomes that stabilizer.
So I can understand it in theory. How does this look in its execution?
Well, again, I'll go back to the Kata piece on Toyota Kata. It's all experience. If your intention, if your belief system is based around supporting your associates, I have a leader right now that really encompasses it as well. So it's refreshing, right? I walk into it on a daily basis of, am I supporting my associates? So how does it go into practice? Trying it every single day. Again, writing it down in your notebooks, having those drawings and having that mindset of, am I here to be the leader, the strength? Yes, I am. Always remember that. Your job is to be a leader. It's not to be the boss. It's to lead through example, support your associates. I liken it to building concrete. The better and the stronger that concrete, the better that foundation that you're building for your associates and your leadership. Your leadership team has to also live these things. And then if you build that foundation, you can build anything. And then you can build it stronger and wider and taller. We all need to grow our businesses. In order to do that, what's that foundation look like?
I would completely agree with you. And a particularly tough time to grow an organization or develop people is in a market slowdown. And let's be transparent, the materials handling industry has faced one for some period of time, or it seems to ebb and flow in and out of market slowdowns more recently. How can leaders navigate the slowdown, and what can you do to ensure you stay profitable within a market downturn?
Yeah, I think it's a good segue to the foundation aspect of things. I think while it's a slowdown, people also have to understand it's really a resetting of the market. And there was so much growth and so quickly that there needed to be a reset. But I don't view the market to be feared. I think it's a slowdown and it's a restructure, but I don't think it's to be feared. I think it's just a strategic window for operational resilience. And really, I think if you look at the current market, that we're seeing the market correct itself towards that pre-COVID 2019 level, 2018 level, and then compounded by global supply chain volatility, the tariff-driven price impacts. So each company has to bob and weave when you're not sure what materials are coming in. For us in the US, what materials are coming in? When does it hit land? What type of tariff is impacted by that now impacts maybe the pricing to my customer, maybe cost to our company. So you have to understand those things. And I think in this environment, my philosophy is that you have to just be fiscally disciplined. You have to start with that, be fiscally disciplined. That always is true. But you also have to be strategically aggressive. And I do believe that in many times in a nervous, scary situation, sometimes the turtle hides its head. In this situation, if you're strategic, you can really grow your company. And I categorize organizations into two groups. You can be the nervous competitor, or you can be the strategic leader. And the nervous competitor retreats into that short-term survival, views training as a luxury expense. We should cut that. In contrast, I think the strategic leader focuses on long-term dominance through optimized costs. I think a strategic leader, they understand that a slowdown, and I think this is an important statement, you have to understand that a slowdown is a gift of time. It's a rare opportunity to convert that idle capacity into intellectual capital. I would advocate that you do a three-prong approach to value architecture. In other words, how am I going to design my current company? How am I going to design it so that when the market does recover, because it's going to recover, we know it's going to recover. So what are you doing now from an architecture standpoint to hit the ground running when it happens, when we do recover? And I think recovery's later this year, right? So what can I do over the next 6 months, let's say, to hit the ground running? And I think it's three pillars. I think institutional knowledge, the scalable process. Use this time to solidify that foundation that we just discussed, right? We always need to have extreme focus on cash. You have to. We also have to have extreme focus on selling. You have to sell more X's, but take this gift of time to also focus on internal improvements. That begins with 5S. I'll always go back to the 5S aspect of my Toyota background. I would say that it isn't just about cleaning. It isn't just about creating a clean environment. It's about creating a very visual workplace that allows us to see waste and work towards eliminating that waste. So that first pillar needs to understand, how can we make a very visual workplace, whether it be manufacturing, operations, sales, it doesn't matter. This applies. It's everything we do. So if we baseline our current KPIs with urgency, understanding that we have to implement a zero defect policy. When people say it's a zero defect policy, people get nervous. We'll never get to zero defect. Yeah, you're right. You'll never get to zero defect. But if you don't have a goal of zero defect, how do you drive in a direction? So implement a zero defect policy by driving the standards back to our suppliers, internally, externally. Drive back standards of a zero defect policy. And what you'll do is you'll de-risk the entire supply chain. That's, again, internally and externally. The second pillar, I'm going to go back to the human capital. If you're not optimizing your human capital, I find that many organizations fail because their sales team, they lack application and product confidence. I see salespeople all the time. You can drive down the street and I know that my competitors in that one and they're really good at this, so I'm not going to go in there. Here's a building that I can go in because I'm confident about that product. As leaders, we need to take that second pillar, and that's about optimizing who we have on our team, and invest in the training now. It's a perfect time. It's the gift of time to really invest in that training now and move from selling products. Get away from that. Go to engineering a solution for your customer. How can I work with my customer to engineer a solution? And when your salespeople deeply understand the customer's long-term growth goals, also the product you're selling, the application you're putting it into, you can modify a solution to fit them perfectly. That will build a moat around that relationship that competitors can't touch. Trust, trust is a relationship solidifier, period. The third one is I think we have to go back to who would you look at as like, is that experience? How do I give a customer that difference? And I liken it to the Lexus experience. And while I don't own a Lexus, the culture, it's a differentiator. If you take, there's some books on this, there's some great articles on the Lexus experience. And if you mandate a shift towards that transaction of customer to one of hospitality by implementing the Lexus experience, you're going to anticipate service that really treats clients like guests. We create a brand preference that survives market churn downs when you have that. My goal as a leader during a lull, it's a slowdown. It is really when competition stops building because of fearing the conditions. I think we should use this time to reinforce the foundation and pour that concrete. We're stabilizing our processes today, structural integrity to support massive expansion tomorrow. I think continue to sell more. We have to sell more X's and find ways to do so. But you already do know, you just have the confidence and the training to do it. Those that are preparing themselves for growth will hit the ground running tomorrow when the recovery starts.
Yeah, I think it's not exactly the same in recruitment because we don't have customers that we're providing parts and actual, physical services to per se. But in a down market or a client-driven market, you start to see the more transactional individuals leaving the industry. And it's really only the people with that trust and with the relationships who have built a network and solidified it with concrete, as you mentioned, that can maintain a working desk and maintain the relationships that essentially keep the lights on for the organization and the supplier that you are to the wider industry. So I think, customer experience being king is very similar in how it operates in materials handling to how it does on the recruitment side. But I think one differentiator is around the back office and the operational element involved in the materials handling industry. And one thing you mentioned before with the 5S principles, how do you think the implementation of those principles internally within an organization really drive the excellence of the customer experience?
Well, it's a great question. It's a large answer, but I'll say when you can change the mindset of every one of your associates in that, if we remove clutter, we put processes in place. If you create standardized processes around how we do things, 5S just, again, it's not about that cleaning piece. It's also about putting process in place and standardizing that and continuing to grow off those things. When you create those processes for your associates, it becomes so easy for them to walk in and do their daily function. But when you have a process, you also have the ability to, when you have hiccups, everybody's going to have hiccups. But when you have standardized processes, now you have the ability to look back and make some corrective actions and then move forward. If everything's a mess, then when you do have hiccups, it's really just making a bigger mess. And again, it's not about a dirty desk. It's about the mindset of what 5S means, what corrective action means, driving back that with the 5Y, really driving back the mentality of how I...
Yeah, I think what you mentioned before related to implementing those principles internally so that there is that level of excellence within the workplace. It harkens back to the broken window theory almost, where if someone sees one broken window, it's very likely that within a week, the rest of them are smashed on a house. It's a sociological concept. It's the same in the workplace. If it's a mess, there's no pride in what you're doing, and how that translates to the experience of the end customer. I don't think you have to follow too much of a logical chain to realize that it would dampen the experience that they'd have at the end of it all. But you mentioned 5S not being a cleanup project, of course. Obviously, in certain scenarios, cleanups do need to happen.
And fundamentals around selling during slowdowns should not begin with steel. They should begin with data. Customers need assistance in data and understanding the cost of inaction. So I think right now we'll find that certain customers are going to start really looking at spending, but they're not going to stop spending. Customers still need assistance. And so what is the cost of inaction for customers? So we need to work around their CapEx issues. So there's lots of different opportunities, power by the hour. It's really a financial engineering approach of removing the fears from the picture. A salesperson telling them how to feel, that's not going to cut it anymore. You need to get in there, work with the customers by showing them that you're a trusted partner. When you become a trusted partner, you're not going anywhere. And how you do that? Understand applications, understand your product, understanding your customers' needs, safety, the total cost of ownership, efficiencies, etc. That's the journey you need to be there with them for. Being a consultant, not a salesperson. Remember that the nervous competitors are going to start discounting, but a strategic leader is going to develop an ROI story. We're not going to panic. They're going to be a stabilizer for our customers. Let them be calm. Let them understand needs. They're still going to have those needs. It's our job to now try to fulfill them by understanding. For a sales team, find out your customers' needs and become that low risk choice. Operations, you're the architect of agility. So for operations, cash is king. You need to remember that. Sometimes it feels dirty. No, it's cash is king. If we don't want to do a sell off, but you have to understand your inventory. Right? Increase that turnover, know your capital on your floor plan, understand your associates. Maybe you need to change the seat on the bus that your associates are in, because as a COO, if you will, your job is to be agile during this time and make sure that your gross profit is stable. Yeah, I just finished a book by Kevin Lawrence, and it's called the 4 Forces of Growth. One of my favorite takeaways is that we cannot be distracted by problems. We must continue staying focused on selling more X's. It's probably why I've said it a few times during this conversation. Don't let fear be the growth killer. Brett Parent, who's my current CEO, he teaches leadership should focus on 95% of their time on opportunities, 5% on problems. Because if you're not headed for growth, what direction are you headed? In time, and I think we have to understand who our associates are. And 90% of your associates need to be A players. Again, wonderful takeaways from this book.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that your associates need to be A players, and I think that really does permeate throughout an entire organization. I think it was Steve Jobs who says A players hire A players, but B players hire C players, C players hire D players, and that can be a vicious cycle for an organization to get into, and it can create a number of weaknesses throughout an organization, or it can be the difference maker between achieving accelerated growth if you do have the right people on the bus, as you mentioned. But when you are assessing your organization or organizations that you've been a part of, how is it that you analyze the weak points, and what type of reaction is it, and how do you strengthen those weak points once you've identified them?
So executive leadership, it really requires the humility to perform honest self-reflection. And that's part of, the earlier discussion on just what's in the front of my book. The second item in there, if you will, is self-reflection. And executive leaders need to do that. In the framework of weak points, it's rarely a failure of personnel. It's rarely our people. It is almost always a failure of our process integrity. Again, I embrace Jocko Willink's extreme ownership in the sense of, it's happened good, because it provides the data we need to improve. So if you take a better attitude, if you will, of good, problem occurred. It wasn't our associate. It was the fact that we didn't have processes in place for that associate to not make that mistake. So if you utilize Genshi Genbutsu, go and see for yourself, go to the problem, drive down that 5 why process to move past the symptoms, identify the root cause. This creates a culture of psychological safety where the team feels empowered to highlight mistakes. Back years ago, I love the fact that, an associate that made a mistake on the floor, but we would go out and it was so amazing that you thank the associate for making that mistake. And what you do is now we have an opportunity to increase our quality. Thank you. It's a psychological safety factor that you can put in place for your associates. Culturally, all our associates bring opportunities to the front. And this is one of the things, again, at my current company, every associate's empowered. Bring opportunities to the front, turn them into cycles of continuous improvement and growth. If you can create that cycle with your associates, it's just this constant bringing improvements and bringing betterment to your company. And it goes back to weak point analysis. If you can do good weak point analysis, then you can create such a corrective action flow towards high quality processes, et cetera, but you have to embrace it. And I'm a big believer in associate empowerment. I believe it grows a company way faster, but it has stronger roots. If you as a leader and you've put A players in place, listen to them. There's so much they're available to you as an associate, or excuse me, as a leader. Your associate's the one down deep into the problems, and they're bringing all of these to you to be able to drive for improvements in your building. You can choose what steps to take and continue down a path, but having the vision that you've created for the company and drive these behaviors, it will always lead to growth.
Yeah. I can imagine creating that feedback loop from the associates to the executive leadership team is quite a difficult balance to manage, because there's obviously that level of authority, and implicit within that, the capability to potentially lose a job and things like that. So how is it the emotional intelligence and the capability to build trust with those associates, shape your leadership style and shape how you go about your day to day?
If you think about when you first started in the workforce, and I think all of us have a level of immaturity that you start off with, and you learn lessons. And if you embrace the opportunity to continually grow as a person, as a leader, in an executive role, the idea of emotional intelligence, it's primary to what you do. It's often a higher predictor of success than IQ when it comes to an executive leader. And if you can, I'll tell you, my leadership style, it's heavily influenced by Daniel Goleman's work on self-regulation, empathy. And again, go back to the market volatility aspect of things. Team's primary waste, it's often anxiety. So if you can have EQ and you can keep the team on the path to our goal, it's not always easy, but leaders that have EQ can often lead people to get back on track and move forward towards our goals very, very well. I believe that it's our responsibility to lead with transparency, validating our associates' concerns, but immediately pivoting to focus towards the controllables. If you allow your team to focus on what you can't, focus on what you can control, if you demonstrate self-awareness, social skills, we can redirect collective energy away from that macro economic of fears and towards specific, achievable daily actions. Focus on those. Work towards those daily actions in order to get to your goals. You build organizational momentum. You build it, and you ensure that the culture remains stable, even when the market is not. That's still our goal. When you help build high-performing cultures, you strengthen your leadership effectiveness. And with self-awareness and empathy, that is endless. Higher IQ leaders will always navigate those complex situations, and relationships will end up retaining those top associates much, much better.
Talent retention is a key area that a lot of organizations struggle with in our industry. I'm sure you would agree. Right down to the ground level, where you've got technicians who will move fairly regularly between opportunities. And oftentimes that's due to maybe a lack of leadership or a lack of capability within the leadership to understand what's truly going to drive them to execute on the day-to-day responsibilities that they have within the organization. And high performance and success, it's very important for all executive leaders within any industry that you would operate within. But how is it that you really draw down and delve into making your people execute, or generating the capability of your people to execute? And how can that approach support organizations in crafting a high performance culture?
So my perspective has changed so many times through the years, and I would say grown. Rather, change is a relative term in the sense that as you go through these tough times, you go through these experiences, you start to develop different ways to put corrective action in place. I lead on the 40X framework, strategic alignment across organizations. And I've, again, within the past 5 years, gone to more of that 40X framework. Setting goals is easy, right? Executing on those goals in the whirlwind of daily operations, that's the challenge, right? I can set goals all day. How can I deal with those daily operational challenges? So I really like that framework. You must have buy-in from the entire team. So you need to teach it. You need to expect it. But in my current role, my executive team really believes in this. And it's really phenomenal to work with people that believe in these aspects. And it's really 4 items. Focus on the wildly important goals. So let's list them. What is the company's goals? What's that wildly important dilute effort? So if you can make sure the entire team has that wildly important goal in front of them, then they can lean towards that. And then the second one is lead measures. I see so often leadership looking at lagging indicators, sales and so forth. If you focus on leading indicators and understand what they are, and your team will help determine those things, but the high leverage activities that actually predict the future, you need to validate those leading measures and then watch them. How do you watch them? You have a scorecard. That's the third one. You have a scorecard. We always maintain a visual scorecard. If the team's not working and seeing what the score is, they're not playing to win. You have to show your team the score on a daily basis to have them continually driving towards that wildly important goal. And the fourth one, and this goes along with that Toyota discussion. It's a cadence. You have to create a cadence of accountability. We establish a regular rhythm where you review and you meet with your team on a rhythm. Without this cadence, strategy is just a suggestion. You have to have a strategy. Every world-class organization, they have a discipline to turn vision into reality. And that's where this is.
I found it very interesting when you mentioned utilizing leading indicators to measure the performance of the teams that you've worked with, or the organization as a whole. For example, in recruitment, a leading indicator would be the amount of time that you're on the phone, the amount of resumes that you're getting out to relevant people. It's not the revenue at the end of the day. What do you identify within the organizations you've worked in as leading indicators of performance?
Yeah, and they always change depending on where you're at in the organization. But let's take sales as an example real quick. I think if you're looking at number of customer visits, a number of customer contacts, are you creating metrics and the capabilities of these measurement tools to watch the number of times we're getting in front of our customers? Those are leading indicators. They show you what those, and then you have a closure rate. while that's a lagging indicator, well, if I watch the number of touches on the customer facility to each one of their applications, et cetera, if I'm measuring those, I have a leading indicator towards my success rates. So those would be some examples. Phone calls, to your point. I think phone calls are great. A bigger fan of getting in front of a customer because if I've taught my associates the right skill sets and they understand application, customer needs, et cetera, each time you're in front of that customer, you're getting a win.
You're also getting an opportunity, especially if you're actually at the facility. If you have the full capability to provide a solution, you can quickly identify any potential issues and start to move towards providing that solution to that customer. But you keep people accountable by measuring the leading indicators as opposed to the lagging indicators. But accountability doesn't stop at you, and development doesn't stop once you get to an executive position, of course. So what activities is it that you focus on to ensure that you continue to grow and hold yourself accountable to continuing to grow within the position you hold?
I read so many different books on different leadership techniques, styles, just some of the people I've already mentioned. Leadership's not a destination, it's a continuous improvement journey. And if you're not, as a leader, trying to continuously improve, you're not doing justice, not just for the customer, not just for yourself, you're not doing justice for your associates. And I'll always come back that I believe a great leader takes 100% responsibility and leads with deep empathy. Viewing the world from an associate's perspective before reacting is so important. Don't overreact, don't react until I understand what my culture looks like. And I focus on building a culture of high trust where creative problem solving is rewarded. Speaking up is normalized. I want to be a leader that takes blame and gives credit. Never let it be the other way around. A leader of mine, a supervisor many years ago, and I feel old when I say that, but a leader a long time ago said that to me. It is something that I have kept in the front of my notebooks. Take blame and give credit. Don't let it be the other way around as a leader. My personal activity involves discipline. I've mentioned it, a habit of journaling what I've learned. So what I've done wrong. I like to write down what I've done wrong. And sometimes that list can get long because if you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing. And so the question is, are you learning from them? An opportunity sheet where I track my own areas for improvement and study traits like leaders like, Bob Chapman, Tony Robbins. I'd also say that being mentored by Bob Briggs, I'm going to come back to him. For People Works International, it just helped me tremendously by remaining an active listener, and intellectual sponge, if you will. And I need to ensure that I'm not just managing the company, but I'm fostering an environment where both the products and the people are constantly evolving. I would say the best leaders have certain traits. They build strong team culture, trust, open communication, sharing all of our successes. It's not my success. It's all of our successes. Again, I work for a gentleman right now that really embodies that. I think you have to have that mutual respect for one another. The best leaders are visionary thinkers. They empower the team to come up with the solutions. Once you start that cycle, you'll just have solutions coming, not problems. Too many people come to you with problems and no solutions. But if you create that culture and you reward creative people for solving these, even if it doesn't work, even if somebody brings you what might be a solution and it doesn't work, that's okay. You've created that culture. Help the team pivot quickly and lead them through uncertainty, not with uncertainty. Lead them with certainty. And I think surrounding themselves with skilled teammates, diversifying these skills so that they're not encompassing different perspectives. I think you have to encompass yourself with differing perspectives. Let me repeat that differently. I think if you're working with people that are smarter than you, they have different perspectives, you're bringing a team of all those different perspectives with different skill sets around you, all of us will be more successful together. I think you have to continuously learn or else you're falling behind. Doing this, it'll bring you better products, better quality, better people in your business. And ultimately, it means you're going to sell more, create more profit. That's why we're here.
That's exactly right. And you mentioned there, not only learning internally how to develop your leadership style, but also enabling individuals within your organization to learn where the industry is going and learn about the new products and the new introduction of products into the market. And I think you'd agree with me in the sense that the electric batteries, class 1 forklifts being entered into the market, it's been a massive change. And so has the influx of automation, both in terms of the software and the hardware that's starting to integrate into almost every warehouse in the US. What are your thoughts on the shift towards those type of products and what impact that's going to have more widely on the industry?
You're hitting on something that I live, love, laugh. This is one of those things I have done my entire life, is worked with the shift towards electric and automation. So the shift towards automation and electric, it's absolutely fundamental evolution towards efficiency. And if you think about electric products, it offered customers the opportunity to move to more narrow and very narrow aisle, use less square footage and more air. So therefore, there's more efficiency with vertical storage. So the shift towards electric, it was needed, right? It's the next frontier in the integration of artificial intelligence. When you think about electric product, and we can really start looking at that AI, it's coming, it's here. And if you're not preparing for it, you're not preparing. So while I'll say the US has lagged behind Europe in the adoption rates of electric through the years, the business case is now undeniable to move towards electric.
Yeah.
Especially when viewed through the lens of the total cost of ownership. Using data-driven intelligence, electric product is the right choice in many cases. Right now, there's certain times and areas you have to still use internal combustion, granted. But if you look back, all the way to 1983, it was a pivotal moment where electric first took over the market share in the US over internal combustion. And today's electric sales in North America, it sits in that 65% range. You get fluctuation 63, 67, where in dense markets, it jumps up into that 80 range. Europe sits at 80, 83 and electric. So you can see the adoption rate difference there. But we're gonna see electric grow even further, especially with the AI, as I mentioned. I think when you no longer are just looking at a battery and its efficiencies, we're also looking at data-driven intelligence that proves total cost of ownership. AI can analyze throughput, energy cycles right in real time, and an argument for anything other than a future-proof electric solutions disappears. Gathering that data for our customers, that's what TFS does, right? We have the understanding of helping a customer through that data aspect. The initial CapEx for these technologies is higher. The electric product costs more when you first start, but the ROI is found in reduced maintenance and optimized energy consumption, of superior ergonomics and capabilities. However, the real force multiplier is AI literacy. I really believe that to move forward, we're moving past the area of simple mechanical solutions into a world of that predictive analytics. We really need to understand how AI can optimize a facility throughput, manage complex battery cycles, dynamically adjust warehouse layouts based on real-time demands. Those are the things we should be really thinking about. I really do believe the success in this new era, it relies on application confidence. You have to train our consultants, not salespeople. We have to train our consultants to be more than just vendors. They need to be application engineers, fluent in AI-driven data, because then they can talk to our customers about it. And when we provide solutions rooted in load characteristics, telematics, predictive maintenance, rather than just selling a piece of iron, you're moving towards a customer. You're moving that customer from a legacy mindset to a future-proof strategy. I think as a leader, we have to take clear functional understanding of that AI world in order to ensure that we're not just collecting or converting that data into actual competitive advantages for our customers. So providing customers with this data for years is what TFS has done. but we continue to evolve and provide customers with perfect data points to improve their ROI throughput, period.
Yeah, and I can imagine the collection and utilization of that data puts a business like TFS in a really well-positioned spot to move into the next generation of the industry, because as we know, AI trains itself off of the data points that already exist. So the fact that as an organization, you've been collecting that over years is going to allow you to be at the very forefront of the execution and the implementation of those systems as they are developed by the manufacturers. Scott, I've got one last question for you, and this is one that we ask of everyone who comes onto our podcast. What's the most valuable piece of advice you've received throughout your career?
I'm a big, strong believer in, I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion of honesty, teamwork, work ethic, self-reflection. Anybody I've hired over the past 20 years has probably heard that said to them over and over and over again. That's in interviews that I do. That's in daily life. My children probably are sick of hearing it as well. But I'll tell you, I think it said this to me so many years ago. Can you be better tomorrow than you were today? The answer is always yes. So if you do solid self-reflection and you have a mindset of continuous improvement, then tomorrow I'm going to be better than I was today. I'm still going to make mistakes. But I would say that's some of the best advice I've had is be honest, be a good teammate, and have work ethic, and try to be better tomorrow. That's always been kind of my mantra, and anybody that I've talked to or hired in many years has heard that exact statement. So I would have to say that.
Well, it's definitely something to live by, and something that keeps you on your toes in terms of continuously developing yourself. But Scott, all I can say for your time today is thank you. Really appreciated all the insights that you've given us into both your illustrious career history, but also what it is that you see as moving into the next stage of the industry's development.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. If you can't tell, I love these topics. I love discussing them. So I appreciate you having me on.
That was Conversations with CSG. I'm sure many professionals will relate and see value in the insights shared. Stay tuned for further insights from industry-leading professionals on our podcast, Conversations with CSG. Thanks for listening.